Welcome to LFG with JJ, the podcast that helps you level up your CX game by navigating CX and AI technologies. I'm Juan Jaysingh, the CEO of Zinctree, the AI-powered customer experience platform providing solutions that turn every human into an expert. 700 plus companies across 54 countries trust our solutions to boost their contact center proficiency, enable their customers to self-help, improve their internal processes, and more with Zinctree. Hey, Adam, good to see you.
Hey, Juan. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Great, I'm doing well. Welcome to LFG with JJ podcast. Excited to have you on the show. And I know there's a lot going on your side, so I really appreciate you taking the time to spend this show with us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, there is a lot happening in the world and in my role especially, but always good to speak.
Great. Well, for the show, the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about your background. Who is Adam Lindsey? I would love to learn a little bit more about you, Adam, and then talk about the space that we're all in, the customer experience industry and that space. And then bring it back to what's happened in your professional work life, in your job. What's happening, how you're doing your job well, how you're staying relevant, and then finally we'll wrap up with some wrap up questions and other subjects as well. So that's the agenda for the day, and I'm happy to answer any questions before you get started.
No, it sounds good. It should be interesting. See if there's any curveball questions you throw in.
No, this would be pretty straightforward. Maybe a few curveballs in the end. Yeah. So great. So let's start with you, Adam. I looked at your background. You're a veteran at Groupon. You've been there for almost 12 years.
Oh, yeah. June the 13th will be my 12 years. So still in my first job since graduating. So in terms of, graduate job, doing quite okay. But yeah, definitely a veteran.
That's amazing. In this day and age, I think if you stay at a place for like 2 years, that's long term. But someone like you, who've been there for 12 years, yes, it's unheard of. So I would love to, before we dive into your job, we'd just love to learn a little bit about you, your background, who is Adam Lindsey? How would you describe yourself? I'm sure one of the uniqueness about you is staying at Groupon for so long, but yeah, we'd just love to learn a little bit about your background.
So, Adam, I originally come from a small town called Accrington, in the north of England. And what's my background? I used to be in a band. So I was a drummer in a thrash metal band called Endarkenment. That was my pre-Groupon career for a while. Went to university and I studied film and media. So a true Mickey Mouse degree, as they're called, absolutely no relevance in terms of the industry I work in now. And before working at Groupon, I worked in factories. I've worked in, bar staff, kitchen work, you name it. If you can think of a menial job, that was kind of my pre-Groupon days. I also worked in a handful of, customer service contact centers. I worked in sales quite a lot. So I had a lot of, say, mini jobs before Groupon. And then after I graduated, my friend asked if I wanted to move to London with her. And I said, sure, I've been a few times. That sounds fun. So after about 6 weeks of being in London, I was doing bar work. I was doing just anything that would give me money. I was living off my credit card mainly, and applying for anything and everything, but primarily sales roles because, they were the roles I was doing before I went to uni, and I did a few sales jobs whilst I was at uni. And I literally don't remember applying for Groupon. I just received a phone call. I was walking around London between job interviews and somebody said, oh, we see you've applied. Do you want to come in for an interview tomorrow? I said, sure. So I went to this building and I sat on a beanbag in a corridor for 10 minutes, and then I was told I was hired. And then 3 days later, I started, and that was my entry to working at Groupon. I thought I'd be there for about 3 weeks. I thought, it's a minimum wage job. It's a 3-month contract. Let's see what happens. At the time, there were about 50 people working in the office. It was tiny. There were literally nothing was documented. There was no such thing as training or onboarding. I sat next to Daria. It was my friend at the time at work, and the training was just watch what I do for a couple of days and then go wild. And we did. I mean, it was as startup as you can think of. Then Groupon became the fastest growing company in history, and so it scaled. I mean, it was insane. We were in 50 countries at one point, and we moved offices every few months. We kept needing to hire more and more people. And so it was, after a few months there, I became, I went from being an agent. Then my team leader went on holiday for a few weeks, so I took her job, and then I was a manager. And then after about a year and a half, I was asked in a meeting if I wanted to go to India, to Chennai. And at the time, I'd not really done a huge amount of traveling. I thought, yes, great. I'll go to India. I'd love to go to India. And there was a small team of Groupon US folks who were there at the time. And it was just to see, can it work? What happens if you hire people in India? And then after a couple of weeks there, I went back and I said, it seems great. We can have really good people, way more experience than we had at the time, because everybody that was working in Groupon customer services like me, we were just kind of random people off the streets who just ended up working there. And then I spent a year in India, setting up customer service in Chennai, and it was the most insane year of my life. It was like I don't know, how do I describe it? At the beginning of the year, I was interviewing 70 or 80 people a day because we needed to hire that many people. Then I had to personally train each group of, each team. And then each of the new hires, and then it grew from a team of 10, and some of those people are still working at Groupon now, right the way through to 120 people. And then I left. My job was done. It was set up. And then I carried on traveling. I was in South Africa for a few months when we had Groupon South Africa. I went to Berlin, so I became head of German, Austrian, Switzerland customer service, despite not speaking German. So that was a pretty steep learning curve when you can only speak to half of your department.
You're definitely the international man for Groupon, huh?
I spent 3 years living in hotels. I'd have a base in London or somewhere, or Berlin, but it was just somewhere to keep my suitcase and my guitar. But then I'd just be traveling and traveling and traveling, which was the most amazing experience, and I wouldn't change anything that happened. And then I think the last country I moved to was Poland. So I moved countries about 5 times. I think I was tax resident in about 5 different places, and it just got to the point where I remember being in Warsaw and it was minus 18 degrees, and I hit my wall of I can't do this anymore. If that makes sense, I've done it too many times. It was a strange thing to get bored of moving country, but I feel like that's kind of where I hit. So then it'll be 8 years this year that I've been working from home. So still with the odd bits of travel, at least pre-pandemic, but I've been remote for way before it was popular. And
that's amazing. You're the international mystery man. That's amazing. What an amazing background. Being a drummer, That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
The coolest role I think in the band. So I know it sounded like you had
a
a lot of fun
very
doing
undervalued role in the band usually. It's
it.
usually
It
the
is.
front man and the lead guitarist get all the attention. The drummer and the bassist
That
are
tells
just
you how much I
ignored at
know
the
about
back.
music. But I thought that, that's great. And then working all these different types of jobs in the service industry. I always used to tell people, or I've had mentors tell me that they learned a strong work ethic by working at a restaurant, being a waiter or a
Yes.
waitress. And it sounds like you've taken that path, and it served you well.
It's something I think that's really, really important. Like earlier on in the history of Groupon, for example, we used to have overtime. You'd get paid like £1 for every ticket you solved. And so I worked every weekend, and I carried on that, money's money
Yeah.
type of ethic. But then that taught me so much about the role and about the business and about how customers work. And I find very often the problem with people in the customer service industry, and I extend that to B2B, because Groupon, we work with tens of thousands of merchants, and I look after the merchants side of the business as well. People will tend to speak to like the business owner. They might have a chain of 50 restaurants, but who they don't speak to are the bar staff, the waiters, the people who are actually dealing with the customers and living and breathing the relationships that are offered. And I think having that ground up experience has definitely paid off in the long term. And yeah, I think that having a strong work ethic pays dividends. If you don't put the work in, if you don't put the hours in, then nothing happens. You make your own opportunities in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, those are tough work, right? Working in a restaurant, you always have to have a smile on your face and, service your, folks are coming
Yeah.
and eating at the restaurant. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great, but you always have to have a smile on your face. At least in the US, you can make some tips. I don't know how
Not
tips
really
work.
a thing. No, not really a thing in the UK. I mean, you do tip.
Right.
It's not completely alien, and it's become more of a thing recently, but it's not
Yeah.
something you would expect to happen, though.
Yeah. So it's interesting, you went through that. And I also like that you did sales early on in your career. We have a saying here at Zingtree, or just my philosophy in general, is everyone is in sales. It's not a bad thing, whether you're in product, engineering, marketing, ops, you're always selling. Whether you're selling your solution, you're, selling to your teammates, you're selling to partners. Of course, you don't want to be a car salesman and, or not that, hopefully car
Yeah.
salesmen not listen to the podcast, but you don't want to be cheesy. But if you're authentic and you're, trustworthy, making that sale I think is critical and important. So
Well,
it's
it's
great you have
it's. I found that kind of background because I did everything from cold calling, inbound, outbound, retention. Every type of sales contact center type role there is, and went through all the different training and you learn so much. I think cold call sales is the hardest job in the universe, and
exactly
yet
100%.
at the time I was doing it,
Did
I
you
was
get hung
able
up
to.
a lot? When you called, did you get hung up a lot, or did you
Oh,
get through?
we were calling 300, 400, 500 people a day, and it was to sell security systems. It was to
How many
arrange.
people were you calling yourself? I'm
So I
curious a day.
managed to average about 10 appointments a shift, which was 10 times
Wow.
more than the other people on the team.
Wow, 10
And
appointments a shift. A shift is like
so
a 1 day shift.
8 hours. So my job was to get an appointment booked, to send somebody around to your house, to look at your CCTV
We
and your
might have to
fire
have you
alarms and
talk
whatever else.
to our outbound SDR team. We're
Well, it was
just getting
just
that going.
churn. I think you learn within. I think it's similar with job interviews. You know within a minute whether something is going to happen or not. And I think the same is true of sales. You know when to persist and when not to, and it's learning those tips and tricks and phrases, and then having those same tips and tricks and phrases in a customer service environment.
Sure.
Great when you're an agent, very, very good in terms of being able to offer solutions to customers and provide, make everybody happy. The same as a team leader, when you're dealing with escalations, you're managing your team and motivating everybody. And I think having that kind of background is also quite unusual, because nobody ever grows up wanting to be in customer service. It's not like a pet dream passion project of, when I'm older, I want to work in customer experience or customer service. But it's people who from, all different backgrounds come together, and you either have that kind of itch to pursue that or you don't. And so I think having that, there's such a diverse background of people in our industry that there is no singular route to success or a singular route forward. It's just, I think the diversity is what's a real benefit of that. And I mean, like my boss has a degree in philosophy, mine's in film and media, and then my team are dotted all around the world with all kinds of backgrounds. And yet I think having the right mindset and the right, combine that with a good work ethic, and you can't really go wrong.
That's amazing. So you mentioned, I want to get to this question. I think it's an important question for, me to learn and for, the audience to learn is, when did you know, you made it, you made it to becoming a, CX leader, to have an amazing career, professional career, an amazing career at Groupon. What was the tipping point where you felt like, hey, I'm just not walking around UK or London and like getting a phone call and running to an interview, getting hired quickly? But when did you have that calmness in yourself? Like, you know what, Adam Lindsey?
I still haven't got the calmness. I think that I think it's dangerous to be complacent and think you've mastered anything, and it's dangerous to think that you've made it, because then you stop innovating. And I've always said, since my time at Groupon, after a few weeks, I said, the day that 1 month is the same as the next month is when I go, because I'll know that I've kind of done everything I need to do and I've learned as much as I can learn. And so I actively work against that. I actively work against complacency and against thinking I know it all and against being, too arrogant, shall we say. And I think that for me is so important as well, is being able to just let go of things you've built, admit failure, admit mistakes, own it, learn from it, and not to kind of think that, okay, I've done this and this is the best way of working. I mean, again, my time here, I've worked with so many people with so many decades more of experience than I have. And occasionally you meet people, veterans of the industry, decades of experience and all the rest, but then they tend to think in more static frameworks of things that worked in the past, so they'll work again. And I think in the current environment of the world, you can't have that mindset. Everything moves so quickly that you have to keep on top. You have to constantly innovate, see what other people are doing, and then try and see how you can optimize it and replicate it, and not get too tied into those silos of, XYZ is the best way of doing something.
That's an amazing answer. It was a trick question, and you answered that really well, Adam. So kudos to you.
Yes.
But to drill down on that, I get it, right? You want to continue to stay relevant. You're going to continue educating yourself, learning from your, from what's happening in the industry, from your teammates, from your colleagues, partners, and vendors like Zingtree. So you're kind of always learning and growing, and so are we. But was there a time in your life where you felt like, hey, Adam, I have the opportunity to go do something special here with my career? It sounded like, hey, you were doing a lot of different things. You were in the band, you were working at restaurants, you were doing some hard jobs. When did you have the aha moment? Like, hey, Adam Lindsey can make it. Let's go crush it.
I think for it helped working for a startup that grew so quickly, and I was definitely. There is definitely an element of luck in terms of being where I was when I was. I think if you work for a startup, I mean, you're kind of hedging your bets if it's still going to be there in 6 months' time. So I think I always took the perspective of, is there somewhere for me to grow to? I've always had that next level. I've always had that goal of, as soon as I get a new role, it's okay, how can I perfect what I'm doing here? So when I, for example, became head of German Germany and Austria and Switzerland customer service, I was thinking, okay, how do I move to a European role? And how do I move to an international role? And how do I move to a global role? And then in the last 3 years, I've kind of moved away from customer for a while and was looking after merchant experience. And now I've got both worlds, customer and merchant. So it's how do I connect the customer and merchant to create like a marketplace ecosystem? And, that's why we're talking, because Zingtree plays a big part in that. So I think it's constantly having that goal. And again, going back to the complacency, if you think you've made it, okay, great, this is the job I want to do till the day I die, then that's probably where you start to fail. I think that's probably where, I mean, it's after being here for so long, it's almost alien to imagine being somewhere else. But I think that the benefit is the variety I've had in the time I've been here, and keeping that variety going, never being satisfied in a happy way, not as in I'm really miserable, I'm so unhappy, but in a happy way, like not being satisfied with what you've got, always pushing yourself, your team, and everybody around you.
That's an amazing perspective. You mentioned you got a little bit lucky with Groupon getting the job, but of course, luck is involved, but I really do believe that people make their own luck. I think it's your work ethic, your drive that you have, the mindset of, the growth mindset of trying to keep getting better and keep learning. I think all those things put you in position to, land at Groupon and have this amazing experience.
I think, I agree. And I think there was a pivot point, because I think for the first half of my time here, I said yes to everything, which is why I ended up living in 5 different countries and traveling all the time, living in hotels.
You do that when you're getting your career started.
And that's when I hit my wall, where I just thought, I just can't do it anymore. I just, I loved the meeting people and traveling, but my friends back home were getting married and buying houses and having kids. And I thought, I think it was about 28. So I wasn't old, but I felt old. I think after 3 years of travel, I feel, nearing 40. And I think then the second half of my career is very much the opposite. I turn down more things than I say yes to. And I'm very kind of decisive in understanding what is the right thing to do. So I think it's having, I suppose, with age, with experience, with maturity and seniority, you do learn when to say yes, when to say no.
That's an interesting concept, right? Early on in your career, and I was the same way, I think. And you say yes because you're ready. You want to go. You want to prove yourself. You want to get out there, and you want to hustle, and you're taking on as many opportunities as possible. So you're saying yes, and then as you mature and you get older and you get more experience, then you're prioritizing. You're saying no to more things. Is that the right pathway for anyone getting started? You think still it kind of goes through like
I think so. I mean, it seems to be
when you hire someone now who's 22, 23, just coming out of college, you expect them to kind of go through that same journey you went through, saying yes and taking on more opportunities and responsibilities.
I think so. I mean, I think for the team I've managed for the past few years, one of my biggest, most proudest achievements is that they haven't quit on me. I've got the same team working with me.
That's amazing.
For the past few years.
To a great leader,
and I think that I find it's finding the people who you work best with, and I think I'm so selective as well in terms of especially if I'm hiring. I remember even back in the days of setting up India, so my hire rate was about 20%. So I'd only hire 1/5 of the people I interviewed.
Man, I would be in trouble if I was interviewing with you. The bar is high.
Well, the other people who were recruiting, their hire rate was 40%, 50%. But the people I hired, some of them are still there now. I hired the right people, and I'd rather be pickier and I'd rather be more selective to make sure that you've got the right person for the role. Because again, it's pointless hiring somebody. It's not even. It's beyond that. It's not even the hiring. It's pointless asking somebody to do something they don't want to do. If you give somebody a project or a task that they have no interest in, then that will show and that will reflect in the output. So it's again,
Yep.
it's finding people's own, what drives what their personal skill sets are, what their passions are, if you can call it that. And then making sure that you keep that, motivation going.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you mentioned India a few times. I think I told you this before from some of our prior
Yes,
conversations. I was born and raised in Chennai. It used to be called Madras before I moved to the US as a teenager. But that's pretty interesting. You went to my hometown. Yeah, I was
it's
just thinking
crazy.
when we were talking about this. I probably wouldn't have made through the interview process with you if I was still in Chennai and I came to interview at Groupon. So
Well,
I'm
it was
glad I never.
interesting. No, no, it's 6 degrees of separation, isn't it? Everybody's connected. But I think on the interview, I mean, like it was the most insane. One of the most insane experiences of my life was interviewing
So you,
80,
so you,
80
you're interviewing
people
70, 80 people from Chennai every day.
a day for
And you
2 weeks, back to back, no days off, and the people. I mean, just the backgrounds were incredible. The experience that I learned so much about everything. It wasn't just about people's work histories. It was their families. It was their backgrounds. It was their education. It was their motivations. It was their desires. And I think what I found most naively surprising was everybody has the same need in terms of a job. It's again, especially in a kind of a customer service type role. It's finding people who have the right way of thinking and the right mindset. That is it. That
they're
is
very
it.
service oriented, right?
Yeah.
I'm obviously biased, from there, but really hardworking, service oriented people. I've been fortunate to come from that background because that served me well in my career, and it's you see that even when I spend so much of my time now in America and I go back to India, even the people at the hotel, how service oriented they are. They won't let me even carry my bag, right? And so it's over the top, but they genuinely mean it, especially the people that are working in the service business. So it's a phenomenal area. I'm glad you got to spend some time there.
Oh, I love it. It was my second home. Like I lived there for a year, and I remember when I came back,
What was
I
your
was in a
favorite
shop.
Indian food? Did you get used to eating Indian food or no?
Oh
Was
yeah,
that
I mastered eating just with my hands, so I stopped with the cutlery, and I have a really good group of friends. I kept in touch with them, who were I went to all the places the tourists don't go to,
yeah?
and got to
You've
eat
probably
all
seen a
the.
lot more of Chennai than I have.
I
It's kind of
probably
sad to say.
have. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, and I've kept in touch, and I've got people on my team who have since moved to the US and they've moved all over the world, um, and it was to the point that whenever different groups of people would come from the US, I'd be kind of showing them like, oh, there's this amazing restaurant or
Yeah.
beach or club or wherever. There's so much to see and do.
That's
And I
amazing.
remember coming back to the UK and looking at like my pound currency, like the cash, and it looked alien to me. It's like I was so used to rupees, and then there's this strange money.
And it's felt like when you're getting paid in US dollars or pound, you have a lot of rupees as well, so that makes
Yes.
makes it really interesting. So this is amazing talking about your background. What a unique background. Thanks for sharing that. It really shows that how your background from your early days has taken you far to where you are now. So that's really cool to see. I'd love to dive into the CX space, right? I mean, you made a comment that no one kind of thinks about, hey, I want to be a call center rep as my dream job or for my
Yeah.
lifelong job. But here we are. We're in the customer experience industry. What is the state of the union? You've been in this space for so long. You've been a call center agent. You've moved up
Yep.
different roles. You've been in operations. You're now the director of operations for the customer side and the merchant side. What do you think is the state of the industry that we're all in?
So it's incredible how fast things are moving now. So we've been involved. I've worked with countless chatbot providers and AI
Yeah,
companies, and the earlier ones, 6, 7, 8 years ago,
yeah,
were pretty awful, pretty clunky
yeah,
in terms of
yeah,
the kind of responses and how they operate. And now, I
yeah.
mean, everybody's familiar with like ChatGPT
Right.
and all the
We're
other.
adding that into our tech stack, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hot for us.
And so I think going back to even 4 or 5 years ago before the pandemic was a different world. I mean, for our merchant support teams, we started offering Zoom calls, so you could just jump on a call with a merchant and talk them through their merchant center. And again,
Yeah.
something like that would have been unthinkable five,
Yeah.
6 years ago. I mean, we shifted our entire workforce to work from home.
Instead of a phone call for your B2B side, your merchant side, you would just have someone live.
So it's kind of it's making
This
you
is
aware
before
you
the
need the merchants
pandemic.
to be.
You guys were ahead of it, interestingly.
So this was actually during the pandemic. So what we realized, so when we first made everybody work from home, we couldn't offer phone because we didn't have hard phones available and people were working from their kitchen. But then as the pandemic kind of progressed, we realized we're in this for the long haul. We thought, well, we don't need hard phones anymore. We can use a soft phone. People can call in from their laptops. And it was we started piloting to see how that worked. And it's having, whilst it's fantastic that you have things like AI and chatbots and everything else. Sometimes you just need to get on the phone, or you just need to speak to somebody. Different people work in different ways, and I think it's having the multitude of options is what's needed. I think again, in the many years I've been here, we've experimented with lots of different ways of how do we create self-service, how do we deflect, and ultimately, I think if the self-service solution is more effort or it's a worse experience, then you're not going to opt for it. So it's providing options that actually make it better and that customers use through choice. Like, I choose to go this route because it's easier than sending an email or starting a chat conversation. And the same for merchants.
In this day and age, they've got the bar high. So if you're not providing a certain level of service, it's very easy for them to walk out the door and go somewhere else. Right. So it's very interesting. The customer has a very short fuse now.
Yes, and expectations have raised so much as well. I think with the I think we're in the earlier phases, if we can call them that, of translation solutions, like live translation solutions, at least for written channels. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the voice channels in that area as well. So I think where we are now is another kind of turning point where AI is becoming more intelligent, chatbots are becoming more intelligent. Still not a big fan of chatbots because I think they're incredibly expensive and complex.
Tell me about that. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of like one of the challenges or potentially opportunities for people that are listening to this, to like how to address that pain point. But it sounds like you guys have had some challenges, or you as a CX leader have had challenges with the chatbot experience.
Yeah, so there's good and bad ways. I mean, chatbots are an amazing tool in terms of creating a warm handoff to an agent. You can gather information that makes the agent's life easier. It improves the way the customer works. And if you have something that's fixed, like an iPhone, it works one way. So it's possible to have a chatbot that gives you a very good answer. Where they usually fail is in the infinite shades of grey and nuance. And that's where everybody gets rather frustrated. And usually one of the more common things that are typed into chatbots is, I want to speak to a human, put me through to a human. And when you kind of see those like word clouds of like, you're not offering the right solution. And I think where people tend to fall into the trap with chatbots is thinking that they can automate and replace everything, because the chatbot can do everything. And I'm sure, in the distant future, I'm sure that might be a possibility. But if you work in an environment where you have so much complexity, each customer's circumstance can be unique to their purchase, to the merchant they've purchased for, it becomes a very complex thing to set up, which is why we're speaking, which is why I think Decision Trees and Zingtree comes in, is that it provides, as I've mentioned earlier, the avenue of opportunity. It's there, you can use it, but you can still speak to a human being. But the concept is all about, if all the agent is going to do at the end of the conversation is send you a template response, then what the agent themselves haven't added value to that interaction. All they've done is gone onto Salesforce or Zendesk or wherever and applied a template response. So I think for most queries, they could be better handled via, like an interactive decision tree, versus, if anybody has ever gone into the maelstrom of setting up a chatbot and all the complexity that entails, then I suppose you'll understand what I'm talking about. And it's having those controllable levers as well. It's easier to understand what's happening and which levers you can pull if you want to influence a particular outcome. So if you want to, impact the contact rate or refund rate or satisfaction, I think having that oversight and ability to pull those levers makes a world of difference.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, it's great to hear that, interactive decision trees, Zinc is working well for you, and you've had, success there. Personally, when I came on as CEO of Zinc, I was like, how is interactive decision tree going to make this great? And I didn't have enough of a, belief in it. But when I started talking to customers like yourself, they actually come and Google interactive decision tree. It gave me confidence that this is a real thing and this is what the market is looking for. So it's pretty amazing experience for me to kind of hear that firsthand from customers who have kind of educated me, definitely educated me, and to believe in interactive decision trees.
Well, yeah, and our evolution was starting with like agent-facing decision trees, but then you quickly realize, well, all the agent's doing is clicking through the tree.
Yeah,
the customer could do that, the merchant can do that. And so it's empowering the end user. Yeah. Still and retaining that human support. I think the pipe dream vision of having 100% automated support ecosystem is many years away. But it's going to iteratively move towards that. I think it's having the foundation and then iteratively moving towards that future state.
So where do you see the industry? Is that where you see the industry going? There's a lot of things happening in the industry now, like you mentioned, ChatGPT, OpenAI. We're fully invested in it. Our product roadmap has changed in the last 3 months. We're going to be AI, ML driven interactive decision tree engine. So it's pretty cool for us to make investments there. But you being in the space for so long, where do you see the industry going with all the exciting things I'm sure you're hearing as well?
Well, even comparing 5 years ago to now, and how stupid AI was, and how unworkable it was, to now where it can work. It can provide solutions. The same for translation. So, like many years ago, it would be impossible to have like a non-English speaker, French customer speaking to an English agent. Impossible. Because you can't use Google Translate, and the productivity would be terrible. But now you do have multiple translation providers. So it kind of the automation of language, the fact that you don't even need to hire native speakers anymore because you've got the AI that can do it for you. So I think we're at the kind of the infancy of this. I still think that there's a heavy need for human support and human involvement, but it's going to iteratively expand. And eventually, I'm sure, as with many industries, it's not just the support industries. I think, accounting, even I've been reading about even like medical, like you'll get a better diagnosis from an AI doctor in 20 years than you would from a human doctor. So I think it's tricky to understand. Like we if you would ask somebody 30 years ago, what do you think the impact of the internet will be? I don't think you would have expanded it to now, 30 years later, where two people could be sat in their houses recording a podcast with video and it would be streamed around the world. I mean, that 30 years ago would have been impossible. I think there's a similar evolution happening
Yeah,
with AI.
it's interesting, right? I mean, one of our beliefs at Zingtree is our vision is to make every human an expert. We, really believe in it. We're behind it. It's actionable. It's live. It's real. We're making agents an expert. We're making people who are your end consumers an
Yep.
expert to self-solve on their own. With that said, we've heard in the space over the last 10, 20 years, you always hear these metrics that agents or these humans will be replaced by, automation, will be replaced by AI, will be replaced by chatbots. And that claim has been going on for some time now. With that said, the amount of agents that the growth of agents in the customer experience and the customer support and the contact center space has only increased, over the years, over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So it's kind of interesting that you've got more technology, more tools, more automation, but the amount of humans that you deploy to service customer issues, that number has only increased. It hasn't decreased like a lot of people have thought it would. So it's kind of interesting to see that.
Well, it's also that I think that the concept of what support is has expanded, and it's not just about being reactive and answering inputs from emails. It's also, it's about having outreach and outbound, and with social media, that's a whole other world to get into. It's about providing those kind of value add and, extra initiatives that would not even have been considered like a customer service role 10 years ago. So I think it's a case of it's utilizing the freed up time and resource to do better things, other things. And definitely the knowledge is a huge part of that. It's if you can give every agent the same level of experience that would have taken 5 years to learn, just plug and play, then why wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And maybe, like you said, their roles have changed as the humans and the agents have access to more and more, tools. Their jobs, get more complex. They can deal with more complex issues, and it's no longer just reactive. They're proactive. I was talking to a company the other day, a really cool company, and they want to reach out to their customers before they reach out to them with an issue, right? So this call is going to come in, in the next day or two, but we're going to call them. We're going to, reach out to them before they even call us to, surprise them.
Yeah, we do the same from a merchant perspective. So we have signals, so we know something's going to happen. If a merchant stops redeeming vouchers, or they stop accepting bookings, or a refund rate goes up, or a contact rate goes up, we know something's happening. And then we create a trigger that makes somebody do something. And again, it's having that human at the end of it. You could never have what would you do if you have a trigger? So we have a trigger that will tell us, something's going wrong with this merchant, and we call them, and they'll say, "Oh, you must be psychic. My chef quit last week. My kitchen burned down, or whatever else." And
I'm really appreciative of that. Right?
Incredibly so. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're calling them because we think something might be wrong. I mean, you don't hear many businesses that will do that. And it's it's being more intelligent, and we're able to do that. We don't hire incrementally. It's because we know that by making that phone call outbound, you prevent the inbound before it's balloons further and kind of escalated. Being more intelligent with your resources, not just thinking of a support function as a reactive inbound environment. It's something that's fluid and organic, and it should be outbound as well as inbound.
That's great. So, with everything that's going on in the economy, in the market, how are things working for you in your, day-to-day job? Where do you go to get inspiration and knowledge within your CX community? Are there any space that you go to? Just like to learn a little bit more about your day-to-day operation. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced, or learnings you've had recently, or some big success stories? I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, it's a challenging time. It feels like we're in the era of the big layoff,
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people,
fortunately.
uh, looking for new opportunities, shall we say. Um,
Yeah,
I tend to be quite good at keeping in touch with people, and I think that that's helpful.
yeah,
And kind of my organic network, shall we say, because I've worked with thousands and thousands of people in my time at Groupon, and I keep in touch with them. I continue those networks, and that provides its own opportunities. And whenever people in my team are looking for jobs, it helps to have that built-in network to say, okay, I know somebody who, if you're looking for a job, they might be able to help you. I mean, there's of course LinkedIn, and I mean, it's also, I think it's making those opportunities happen.
yeah,
It's like when I started talking to Zingtree, the whole origin of it was we had this terrible tool that was really resource intensive from an engineering perspective. It didn't do what we wanted it to do. And it was just an agent facing decision tree tool. And I was fed up of the excuses of we can't develop this, we can't develop that. So I think it was just taking the initiative to just literally Google like agent facing decision tree tool, seeing what was out there and just kind of making those connections. And yeah, again, you make your own opportunities. It's not
yeah.
something
We're
that.
very thankful you Googled us. I don't know if I told you this, but you went through a really deep dive technical evaluation, and we've got close to 700 customers in 50 plus countries. But I can't remember a customer. We've been working with you for over a year now, and it's
Yeah.
been an amazing partnership. But I can't recall a customer that put us through the ringer like Groupon did. So I think you took your 20% hiring metric into your vendor metric too, and
Oh
it was good.
yes,
It
especially my team. If they have a question, they will be very persistent until they get an answer.
No, it
Um,
was extremely difficult, and I still remember we came out of a call, and one of our founders was super excited because he answered like the hundreds of technical questions that your team was asking him, around the technology, around Salesforce integration, and he was just so fired up, and he said a few interesting words that we actually recorded, and we still played as inspiration from time to time. And right after the Groupon call was ended, he was super fired up. So yeah, we remember that very well. You guys had a very, strong technical evaluation team that really did put us through the ringer, and it was a great experience. I'm glad we came out of it in a positive manner.
yeah, it's a good test. I think if you're trying to partner with a business and they can't answer questions, and the red flags start going, don't they? Like, but the ability, I think just being able to answer questions honestly it opens and unlocks doors.
Well, this has been great. I do want to wrap this up here. I know we're coming up on time, but I do want to wrap it up with I know, you have a family now, you have a daughter, what, besides your work, I know you're dedicated, committed, you're spending a lot of time there and with your family, what are your hobbies? What do you like doing?
Yeah.
And I,
Well, so about 3 years ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, I broke my hip and I couldn't
Ooh,
walk for 4 months, and I, had a pretty awful time then. And so I started with a personal trainer
yeah,
about a couple of years ago, and then that's become my new passion, is just being fit and healthy. And I have
yeah.
2 gym memberships. I still have the same PT. I think just being healthy and fit and active is probably the thing that is my happy place now. So
I
whereas it
love it.
might have used to have been going to the pub, now it's going to the gym. And that's definitely my new favorite thing to be doing. Like
I think
I
we'll
have
get along well there. I think
yeah,
working
I've got
out,
a
making sweat is
exactly.
amazing. Yeah. And I still work out every day. I try to play, sports, tennis, but I'm really into pickleball now. So I know I told you about it. So when I visit you, hopefully in the UK office soon, we'll have to get out and play some pickleball.
Yes, I need to practice. I need to find a pickleball partner, but I don't think it's a thing in the UK yet, but it looks fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And then Adam, this has been great. For the viewers out there, someone who's just getting their career started. I like to wrap up with this question: what advice would you give them, right? If what would you give a younger, Adam Lindsey, based on what you've learned, to have the career that you've had so far?
I would say whatever role you are in, it doesn't matter. I mean, I started as a temporary first level customer service agent. Put the most work in you can and the most effort. There's always that next level, no matter what role you're in, no matter how junior it might be. If you push yourself, you will keep progressing. And then when you get to that next level, push harder. That's the only advice I would give. I genuinely don't think it matters where you start in a business. If you put the right effort in, work in the right way, I think anybody can succeed in any environment, as long as you have the right mindset. So that would be the advice I give.
That's an amazing advice. One of my closest mentors told me, Juan, forget about the title, because I was, hey, I need this title. Forget about the title. Forget about the role, what position you're going into. You're just getting your career started. Focus on the people. Are they good people that you're around? Are you surrounded by good people? Are you surrounded by smart people? And if you are, forget about the role, forget about the title. Just go and crush it. Head down, work hard, have passion, and do your work well. Because the smart, good people will recognize that, and great things will come out of it, either in the short term or long term. So
it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. So your advice is spot on. It resonates with me and the folks I've talked to. So thank you so much, Adam, for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us and me. And look forward to continuing having more of these conversations down the line.
Thanks,
hopefully
Sean.
in person and on the pickleball court.
On the pickleball court.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, enjoy. Have a great rest of your week, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks. It's been great speaking with you. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Take care.